Hi, welcome to Table Talk and thank you for joining us. January is Cervical Health Awareness Month, but is also a month where we tend to think about our health and how we want to do a little better in taking care of ourselves. Our guest today is certified nurse practitioner Theresa Hill to talk about women's health issues and how to take better care of ourselves in the new year. Theresa has been practicing for over 30 years and worked in women's health for 20 years. She is the owner of Family Care Clinic and the co-owner of Family Care Wellness. Well, Theresa, welcome to the show today. So glad you agreed to be a part of Table Talk.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate being able to be here.
Well, as a caregiver, what are some of the top points that you want women to focus on in 2024?
Well, I think that's the same for women, men, children, is just healthy behaviors. Thinking about now we're in flu season right now, so the hand washing and covering your mouth when you sneeze or cough with your elbow, not with your hand, because we touch so many things with our hand. Even if you don't cough in them, you may touch something. And then they've done so many studies that you touch your face so many times an hour, and just trying to be healthy, eating well, resting well, some sort of movement, exercise. The exercise sometimes turns people off, but just sort of movement. Go and walk with your friend. Take your dog for a walk.
Yeah.
Take your kids outside.
Well, and that's, we have options now that we used to not have, as far as like we're into the yucky winter months where you don't want to get outside as much, but the mall, which the county bought, is still a great place to go.
It is.
We've got the Milner Center now. And we've got lots of affordable options as far as our physical health goes for people to participate in. And places like the mall, it's free. You just show up and walk your laps.
Yes, and you can go early and late, I think.
Yes. So as you said, it is getting into cold and flu season for sure. I've heard lots of people sick right now. And then even COVID is kind of showing back up again. Have you had very many patients test with that?
Lately, we've had more flu. We've had the A and the B flu, and some COVID, though.
Yeah. Always got to be aware of,
I know.
of that.
I think that's going to be
just going to be
around, and it may be more seasonal, but I think it's still been around.
Yeah.
This summer we had some.
Okay, so always be prepared, and as you said, keeping our hands washed and things like that are always so important. So we're going to talk a little bit in depth and focus on women's health. So we're going to get into some gynecological terms and things like that because you worked in that area for so many years. So tell us about because, as we said at the beginning of the show, January is Cervical Awareness Month. Where is the cervix in the female body, and how does cancer form? And from what I read, it's a preventable cancer. So let's start with where the cervix lies in the female body.
The cervix is the bottom part of your uterus, and your uterus is called the womb. That's where babies grow. But the lower part of your uterus is called the cervix, and it has a part that's a little bit up inside of your body, and the other part is in the upper part of your vagina.
Okay.
And it's not very big, but there are types of skin there, and I always say to my patients that your face is a type of skin, your lips is a kind of skin, and inside your mouth is a kind of skin. And in your cervix, there's an area like that.
Okay.
It's called the transformation zone.
Okay.
And it is where most cervical cancer starts.
Okay, and I guess it's the cells that tend to grow in that area can turn abnormal.
Yeah, it's the type of skin. You don't find as much cancer on the outside of a woman's genital area. You don't find as much cancer in the vagina because that's a different kind of skin.
Okay.
Think of it like, I think the skin on your face is tougher than the skin inside your mouth.
Right.
It's more open to absorb things.
And why do they say that cervical cancer is a preventable form of cancer?
Well, because they think at least about 90 to 99% of cervical cancer is caused by a virus called HPV, and that means human papillomavirus. There are about 100 types of human papillomavirus. Some of them cause common warts you see on your hands or other places. Some can cause warts on your genitalia, and some can cause cancers. Now, we're talking about cervical cancer, but they can also cause cancer in your throat, cancer in your vagina, but the cervical cancers is what we're talking about. And being preventable means that HPV, though, is the most common sexually transmitted disease in the United States. So it is so widespread that it's hard sometimes to prevent because 80% of women have some type of HPV by the age of 50. Now, when you say preventing it, we talk about using condoms during intimate activity, but since it is a skin thing, that the condom does not cover the entire skin.
True.
Also, your risk of cervical cancer is increased if you've had intimate activity with somebody under the age of 18. You've had more partners than less partners. If you smoke, smoking, they think, has something to do with your immunity maybe, or fighting cancer. And then not having had the vaccine. There is a cancer vaccine in the form of the HPV vaccine, Gardasil. It came out in 2006. I think my kids, I have girls, and I haven't worked in it for an OBGYN at that time, having taken the class to look at people's cervixes who have had an abnormal pap, and actually being trained to where to take a biopsy to know what treatment they might need. I wanted to make sure my girls were in line, number 1 and 2, to get that vaccine. I read something last night in anticipation of this interview that they did a study of Tennessee over, I don't know how many years. I think it was at least about 10 years. It was in the Journal of Prevention. They had looked at just claims data for abnormal pap smears for young women who had TennCare. But during that article, they were saying that Tennessee has only 45% fully vaccinated young people.
With the HPV
With
vaccine.
the HPV.
Oh, wow.
Now, it is horrifying for parents to think about their children having sex. I mean, it's absolutely horrifying. And there's some misinformation about side effects of the vaccine. There are some side effects with all vaccines. But they usually are never serious. I personally, since 2006 of it being out, I have not heard of a serious
Like a
side effect or subsequence of having the vaccine. There's some serious misinformation. My children got it. My grandchildren are going to get it because the World Health Organization hopes to maybe see if they cannot eradicate cervical cancer or be well on the way by 2030. Now, going back to parents' hesitancy, what I tell parents, as I said, it's horrifying to think about your child having sex, but they're going to grow up, they're going to get married. Maybe they have not been with somebody when they get married. That's what we hope. But who's to say what their husband or wife would bring into this relationship? So we want to prevent this. And if a child gets the shots, the immunizations, before the age of 15, they just get 2. If they are not completed with those 2 by the age of 15, there's a recommendation of 3. The age they're recommending it for is between 11 and 13, in hopes that we're well ahead of any kind of intimate activity, and their immunity is there, so that if they are exposed to HPV, they will not get it.
Right. Well, and as you said, you're protecting them when they're young for things that you hope wait until they're adults, but the time is right in their younger years to get the vaccines.
Yes.
I know when my children were young, it was around that time frame, and pediatricians were talking about giving the HPV vaccine, and I didn't have any, qualms about giving it to the kids or anything like that. But I don't hear as much talk about it lately. Do you think we're just kind of... I hope that pediatricians are still talking about it and
I feel
pushing
like they
for
are.
that.
I just feel like there's been some pushback against the COVID vaccine, some politicalization of that, and then there's the concern of vaccines have been in the future. Do you remember when the last time you heard of anybody having chicken pox was?
Yeah,
measles.
I don't.
But now there are communities where people have not had their children vaccinated, and that pops up. And sometimes these are very serious illnesses, and that can lead to death. Even the whooping cough has come back in some communities.
Yeah.
I remember Dr. James Phillips, who was retired from private practice in early 1980s when I became a nurse practitioner. He looked at me and said, "Theresa, it's really hard to watch a child die of whooping cough."
Wow.
And it just,
he remembered the day when it was more prevalent.
Yeah, we had chicken pox in my household when I was young. I remember having the mumps. I'm sure I had the measles, but you just don't hear about that now. And it's sad when there are so many things that are preventable. And then I want to just go back to the vaccine just for a second.
Sure.
They have changed the guidelines recently to recommend the vaccine to anybody up to the age of 45 who have not had it yet. Now, certainly by that age, a great deal of people may have been exposed to the virus, but it may be protective. They think, like, say, if you have the virus, what are the chances of clearing it? I don't know the actual percentage, but I know that most people's bodies, their immune system will clear it, but some people don't. And those people are the people that are at risk of having the cervical cancer or the other cancers that are caused by the HPV.
And of course, when we're talking about cervical cancer, though, is the Gardasil vaccine just for young women? Or
No.
That's what I was going to get at, because as our daughters get up into the age where their bodies are changing and they're going through puberty, we kind of talk about it a little bit more, but the young men seem to maybe not get that talk as much. So, but they should be getting it as well then.
Yes. One of the first reason, when the Gardasil came out in 2006, it was a Gardasil 4. There were 2 types of HPV that are linked more to cervical cancer, 2 types that were more linked to genital warts. Nobody wants genital warts. If you've ever had them, they're hard to get rid of. I promise I've taken care of ladies. Anyway, then in 2019, they came out with the Gardasil 9, which does more for the types, some of the other types for cervical cancer. But they also recommended it in the beginning for females. Then they recommended it for males, which I thought all along. Well, where are these young women, for the most part, getting their HPV infection? It's from males. So we need to, males don't have cervixes.
Right.
But there are...
but they can contract the HPV.
They can contract the HPV, and they can have throat and mouth cancers. As a matter of fact, is it Kirk Douglas's son, Michael Douglas? I think he said that he had his throat cancer from HPV.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I have a friend whose brother might be alive today. He had some sort of mouth cancer, and I don't know for a fact. I know nothing about his medical records, but I know that he did continue to smoke, and he passed away. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that in the majority of cases like his, it would have been caused by an HPV virus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you don't really think about that as much. You do kind of, I don't know, as you introduce tobacco and all of the chemicals with that, I'm sure it does make your mouth more susceptible to abnormal cells and things like that. So, I guess, when do women need to begin gynecological care, and does it conclude when a woman goes through menopause or has a hysterectomy?
Well, it depends on if you're saying going to the gynecologist or going to your primary care. Most primary care providers are well versed in taking care of male and female health throughout the lifespan. As far as thinking about specifically things like pap smears, that has changed so much over the years. When I first started being a nurse, that was preached to every woman: get your pap smear every year, get your pap smear every year, get your pap smear every year. But over the years that has actually changed, and there are some patients that you have to educate on why it has changed. Because now we don't do any pap smears on anyone younger than 21.
Okay.
When you think about it, a pap smear is a screen for cervical cancer. You're looking for cells that usually, when you do a pap smear, I have done maybe less than 10 pap smears the whole time I've been a nurse practitioner that have flat out said cervical cancer. I have done innumerable ones that have said some abnormality. And when I first started doing that, we would certainly do a procedure called a colposcopy. It's where you look at the cervix with a magnified light, you put something on there, vinegar, which is a little stingy, and it highlights the area, and then you take a biopsy, more cells, and it pinches, and send that to the lab, and it depends on what it says. At that time, you would either get a cryotherapy, which is a freezing treatment. It would freeze the outer layer of cells, and it would go down maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, and it would freeze those cells. They would die. They would slough off. People would have a really runny discharge, and then you would have a repeat pap every 6 months for 2 years to see if they were gone, and they stayed gone. Or if, when you did the biopsy, the cells were more abnormal, more serious, more precancer, they would do a procedure where they removed a deeper area there. And I got to see that. It's called a leap. And they would remove more cells, and it was a good amount. I said, is that the amount you usually do? And he said, yes. But that area does heal well, but those people, their cervix is scarred. So then they got repeat paps every so often. But when you scar your cervix, this is where the baby comes out. This is where you dilate when you're in labor. So there is a possibility of having a complication, although it's very rare. So now what happens is most all of your pap smears are not just a screening for abnormal cells. They are a test for abnormal cells, but they run a test for HPV to see if you have the virus.
Okay.
So then we take that information and your age and your history and let you know how often you might need another pap smear. And for many people, younger women, it might be 3 to 5 years. So to look at somebody in their 50s and 60s and say, oh, we're not going to do a pap smear on you for 3 to 5 years.
That could be alarming.
That is, whoa, what do you mean? I'm
Right.
supposed to have this every year.
Right.
But if you do not have the human papillomavirus, your risk of having cervical cancer in the next, say, 5 years is very minimal.
Okay.
Now, having said that, some women will think, oh, I don't need to go have my checkup. Well, I would disagree with that because women get their blood pressures checked. A lot of times they get their cholesterol checked, their blood sugars checked. They get their medical breast exam. They get
Yes.
reminded of doing that every month. And then they, if they're at the right age, they would get the order to have their mammogram. So there's a lot of health that goes into your yearly visits
Other than just the pap smear.
other than just the pap smear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, does it, I can remember, and you can tell me if this is still accurate or not. You said starting it at 21, and used to, it was like well upon age of sexual activity. So does the 21 thing get ruled out if the person is sexually active before
Yes,
then?
it does.
Okay.
Now, when we do well children, we like to say, I hope mothers don't hear this too much, but we all take them in the bathroom and say, what you tell me is between you and me. And let me just go ahead and say this. In the state of Tennessee, young people can go to a medical provider for sexually transmitted disease, birth control, and something else, and it may be for mental health. But I think if it's suicidal, that the provider has to deal with that. You cannot let somebody look at you and say, I don't want to be here anymore. I think I want to hurt myself. There is action.
You're bound to tell the guardian.
Yes. Now, the health department where I started working as a nurse practitioner has a family planning program, and young people can go there for birth control, sexually transmitted testing, male or female, without a parent or guardian being informed. And that is horrifying to a great many of parents and guardians. But I look at it like this. Your child needs to know that there's somewhere they can go if they cannot come to you. I had a relationship with my kids in that I couldn't be the parent that they came to me and said, Mom, I'm sexually active. I need this. And me put my arm around them and say, thank you for telling me. I appreciate it. Although whatever the reality is, I could not deal with it. So I had a pact. My children knew where they could go. And I had a pact with a friend of mine who was a fellow nurse.
Right.
They can go to her and say, I need help, I need this and this, and they would not tell me. I did not want them to have one mistake turn into a much bigger consequence.
Right, exactly. And I'm sure many school nurses are well versed in this and used to helping whomever, whether it's a young girl or a young man, as far as, helping them with whatever resources they need.
We have wonderful school nurses. I remember a time when there weren't any school nurses, and we were talking about how there was a need. It was just the need then for diabetic children to get their medicine, or other children to get their medicine, because the teachers didn't feel comfortable with that. But now we have
kind of pushed on the school secretary to dole out the meds and things like that. What part of self-care do women seem to neglect while they're raising their families? And how do women, I guess, need to reprioritize themselves during this time? This is about the age of your daughters right now. They're in the midst of taking care of families, and I remember during my own time that was a time of neglectfulness of myself.
And it's hard. moms take care of everything now. It seems like they know how many rolls of toilet paper in the house. Do we have a spare? They think about all of those things. But I think if you can, as you're prioritizing your child's health, think about, let's get my appointment. Let's get my checkup. Let's think about making sure that I'm moving. I'm doing some sort of healthy activity. That I'm eating well. That I'm feeding my children well. But I'm also doing that. Whether it's taking your lunch instead of having fast food, or not having lunch at all, or maybe taking fruit as a snack instead of something else. But it's really hard for women. I think women are programmed to be caregivers for others, and it's hard to think of it not being selfish sometimes to take care of yourself. And it's not. If you're not in your best shape, you won't be able to take the best care of everybody else.
That's true. And we're also modeling those behaviors to the children that we're trying to raise. And it's hard, though. I remember those days filled with Little Debbie snack cakes and, things like that. And it's hard not to partake in what you're buying for the kids, but it's better not to even buy that for them, I think.
As our society is now, it's harder to do the healthier things, and it's easier to do the unhealthy things,
Yeah, it is. We can tell by how many our access to fast food and how we get lots of those places, but not as many places to eat that are the healthy options.
Or the expense
yes.
of things that aren't as healthy.
Yeah.
And a treat every once in a while is okay.
Yeah.
It's just shouldn't be the majority of the time.
Yeah. So as a woman grows older, our bodies are changing just drastically during this time, whether it's due to menopause or early menopause through a hysterectomy. What is happening, I guess, to the female body? And then what are the options to give some remedy to that?
Well, I guess it depends. As you age, you lose muscle mass, and then you also gain fat, just the way you do. I always tell people, if you took a silhouette, just a black silhouette, like a cameo, you could put a baby, a toddler, a teenager, a middle-aged person, and an elderly person. You could look at and say, well, this person's probably this age. Our bodies just do that, and there's a lot of that we can't prevent. Some of the things that come with aging are osteoporosis, especially for women. So that is a silent killer. My mother-in-law had numerous broken bones. She even broke her femur. Your femur in the top of your thigh is the strongest bone in your body. She just was standing and it broke.
Wow.
She did have early hysterectomy. She didn't like the way the hormones made her feel, and she didn't take them. So that affected her bones. But heredity. Her grandmother had passed from that. Her mother had died in childbirth. But there are a lot of things that you need to keep your eye on health-wise as you become 40 or 50 or 60 or even 70, 80, As far as your body composition, that has something to do with your hormones. Women go through menopause typically about the age of 50 or 52, and that menopause is when you have not had your period for a year. Now, if you're younger than that, I've had a lady, she was 42, and she said, I haven't had a period in 2 years.
Wow.
We checked her, and she was menopausal. There might be some health reason for that. Some people earlier, some people later, but if you're having problems with your menstrual cycle before that, or you're still having periods, the one lady I had was 55, periods like clockwork. So it's very different for most people, but there's not a lot you can do. Now, as far as taking hormones, that is a little bit controversial. I remember it was in 2000 they came out with this huge study thinking it would show that hormone replacement therapy would be beneficial, and what they found out that maybe it wasn't. But then when you looked a little deeper, since menopause is around age 50 or 52, the average age of the women in that study was 63. So they were well past menopause. They gave those people hormone replacement therapy, and they did see more blood clots and breast cancer. Some breast cancers are hormone fed. So it depends, I think, on your family history. They are coming out now with some more non-hormonal medications that will help with the hot flashes. They're pretty miserable. I did not, for years when women would speak to me about that, I'd think,
Can't be that bad.
I understand what you're talking about. No, I didn't. And I don't think mine were as bad as some people's. I really don't. But until you experience it, you don't know. So there are some things that help with vaginal dryness that are non-hormonal related. You know, you have some parts of your body, they literally go from a grape to a raisin. You know, it really, and you have more trouble with holding your urine or different things. So that is when you really need to seek professional care when you're having problems like that, or talk to whoever you see about what's going on with your individual. And then I want to go back as far as going to gynecological care. You don't have to go before age 21 unless you're going to be married, unless you're sexually active. But if there's any time from age 10, 9, 10, whatever on, you feel like something is not right, go. If you're when young women start their periods, they typically do not regulate for a year. But after that year, if they're not regular, you need to talk to somebody. There could be something else going on. Hormones do a great many things. Insulin is a hormone, for instance. Your thyroid hormone. It's not just your estrogen and progesterone hormones. Women have testosterone. Men have a little bit of female-type hormones, and women have a little bit of male-type hormones. You run into problems sometimes when you have too many of one.
So lots of things to check out, as you said, if things are not going and we know our bodies, whether things are.
Yeah, and young women should be trained to write it down. You know, keep up with it. Let somebody know. Let mom know. You know, girls don't like to talk about that.
Right, but if nothing else, keep it on your phone, keep a log or something.
And let mom know so that mom can get you an appointment.
Right. Yes, and as you mentioned with the menopause and things like that, I see lots of ladies that actually go to the gym and things like that, trying to maintain some of that, the muscle. And that's also, I guess, good for our bones and things like that. It is
weight-bearing exercise. Even if it's walking, lifting weights a little bit, it's very good.
Yeah, and then, of course, we can't ever go wrong by eating a little better, too.
That's right.
And your practice, too, has grown tremendously, and you have added some resources for therapy for mental health care. Yes. Tell us about these resources and how they can help women.
Right. Well, we have 2 full-time mental health therapists and 2 part-time mental health therapists. And as I said, I've been a nurse for a long time. We had maybe 2 people in the entire Warren County when I first started, and they only took private insurance. So that left out a good deal of the population, male or female, of seeking any kind of help with a mental health things. We've had, Cheer Mental Health here for a while, but for some reason, I've had people that they think there has also been a stigma with mental health. And we are hopefully going in the direction of that not being such a problem. But it is more of a problem for men, I think. But for women, women deal with a lot of things, but women are probably who we might see the most, because women in general seek medical care more. But it has been wonderful for us. We also see a lot of children, people with ADHD. I was thinking about the pandemic really has increased awareness of mental health needs, because since that, the world was turned upside down. And when I first heard that there was a virus, I'm sort of geeky about medical stuff. I'd read this book about the 1918 flu epidemic. And that time it swept across the world during World War I in that era. But it killed more healthy individuals, young people. 25% of the people who got the flu in the 1918 flu died. And so when I heard there was a virus, it freaked me out a little bit. But people that didn't know that history, I think it changed people's jobs. And for the young people, it changed their environment so much. They weren't doing school the same way. Not everybody learns through a screen.
Yeah.
And the world was just suddenly thrown upside down, and who knew where the pieces were going to fall, and that was very difficult. It added to our already need for mental health care.
Well, you think we kind of take for granted the support we get in our jobs, in our schools, and things like that, and that one-on-one where we can talk. It may just be talking at the water cooler to a coworker for 5 minutes, but you get a little something from that kind of helps you.
Well, when you're at home, you're asleep a lot, so you literally spend as much time with your coworkers or schoolmates that you do with your family. And of course, school is difficult enough, I think, in certain ages, when your body's changing, you're thinking of different things. I, in the past, have done puberty classes, and mothers would bring their daughters, and I think it was 4 sessions, and during one of them, they had questions that we answered. But then I said, who in here who's a mother would want to go back and trade places with their daughter? And not a hand was raised. That those young middle school and high school years are tough.
Yeah, they are, and they use other students, other friends as a support system, and when that support system was taken away, I'm sure it was very hard. So let's just talk on real quick. We'd have to be, I guess, living under a rock to know to not be aware of body change and the perception of our bodies of women of all ages. What are your concerns for women who are so, it's kind of natural not to want to age, but I'm amazed, I guess, at how young all of this is starting with the fillers and the, what are your concerns about that?
Well, body image has been a problem for a while. Like when I was younger, I don't think you're my age, but we had the Twiggy, and then they had the talk about why are all these models 5'10" and weigh 120 pounds? That is setting a unrealistic body image for people. And I think we're still working through some of that. Now I think there's is it an anti-aging component to it? I mean, if you go back 50 years, every lady my age had white hair. I don't ever let it get, very far. But I have to buy my color now, But that is not changing. That is not injecting something into my body that could have a side effect or an infection or some sort of a permanent scar. I think that there's the thought of, I need to change this one thing and everything will be all right. Now, I don't know that.
Right.
I don't live in that particular world. I do have one friend that has gotten some Botox, but that kind of wears off. But then again, you're paying for that out of your hard-earned money every how many weeks it is. And what is it going to get you in the long run? I think the way we're not very kind to ourselves.
Yeah, you're right.
We're not very kind to each other, and we're not very kind to ourselves when we look in the mirror.
Yeah, I know when we see, I guess I get concerned about ladies, and you see all these stars and things like that who have access to all of this in their 70s and 80s that look like they're maybe in their 60s, and they've had the facelifts and things like that. But that becomes what we think we should look like too, and we don't see the behind the scenes of what went into looking like that.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of interviews with Justine Bateman. I don't know if you remember, know who that is. She is, I don't know, maybe in her 50s. I'm not sure, but she is aging without any of that, and she's just saying, people have gotten away from the way what happens in nature to thinking that that's abnormal.
Yeah.
And
or they look bad, or they're not doing well, or they're not aging well. It's just aging.
And then I wonder where that comes from. Is that coming from a place of being secure in how you are, and you just rather have this one little thing, or is it this one little thing will make everything okay, which probably won't, and then you need something else to make everything okay.
Right, maintaining and doing more and more and more.
See, I always tease that I had that body dysmorphic image that where people look and they see a fat person. Well, I look in the mirror and go, nah, I've seen worse.
Me too. I don't look that bad.
Now, we may not need to be examples for people,
Yeah.
but they need to be kinder to themselves.
Yeah, they do. And that's something, again, we're passing on to the younger generations about their bodies and accepting them. And so as we conclude, if women want to prioritize, say, a top 3 things in 2024, what would you want that to be as far as their health goes?
Well, I'm thinking just, again, being kinder to yourself. You know what? Maybe there's a dish in the sink. But I think mental health, being kind to yourself mentally, is very important. Don't compare yourself to other people. And that's one of the things that I think maybe they say that's happening with the younger people. They're on their phones, and who puts their dirty laundry or their socks in my floor? They don't do that. They put the very best for people to see, so nobody sees the negative part. So when you have something that's not perfect in your life, you think you don't measure up. So I'm thinking being kinder to yourself and to others is very important. And also, we're talking about health, just taking care of your health so you can take care of your family's health, whatever that is, whatever age your kids, if you don't have kids, your spouse, your friends, your family.
Yeah, and as we talked about, as you're neglecting your health, there's a time when it catches up with you. I tend to have, I was that mother, that thought, I'll worry about my diet and exercise later. And I have tried to be more, but wouldn't it have been nice to have been able to focus on it and prevent things?
Well, as far as like what goes in my, diabetes goes in my family, and I would see things happening to my mother, lose a toe, whatever, have a heart attack, and I'd think, oh, I'd get on that treadmill, but then I'd, get off. Well, it's like being an alcoholic. Maybe you fell off the wagon, but get back on that treadmill. Whatever it is, just do it. Just don't beat yourself up because you didn't do it. Just go from now forward.
And it doesn't have to be January. We can pick up with it anytime.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much, Theresa. This has been so informative, and we want to encourage our audience, men, women, and of all ages, to take better care of themselves. I would like to thank you for joining us today. We hope you found this show interesting and informative. Wish you a safe, healthy, and happy week, and come back again for more Table Talk.